Hello, hello. Yes, as John already said, I'm really, really glad to be back here. I think Pioneers is just the most fun tech conference in Europe and I think worldwide. They really know how to party. You really know how to party. Saw that last night and I'm sure we see that tonight again. I am going to talk about how you get more money from better investors than without using AngelList and without using the tips that I'm going to share with you. My name's Philipp, Pimo on Twitter if you want to tweet about this. You can also tweet questions that I'm going to answer afterwards. After this session, I'm going to be back there in the Winter Garden taking questions. So if you want to meet, if you want to talk about your startup in AngelList, please find me after this session behind here. So what does AngelList do? We let founders invest in founders because we think founders are the best investors in the early stages of a company. These are people who've built businesses themselves. These are people who have scaled businesses themselves and have done things that you as a founder can learn from. And those are people that understand what your worries are, what your questions are, the things that you might not know about. And therefore, it's better if you raise money from former founders than from professional money managers. I think actually this is the wrong slide deck. But yeah, that's fine. I'm going to go through with this one. If we can switch it out to the new one that I uploaded today, let me know and I start over with the other slides. Basically, the idea why I'm giving this talk and the thing that I've learned being at SeedCamp for 4 years and investing over 100 startups during that time and working with these 100 startups to raise more money from more investors from all over the world is that fundraising is really, really hard to get right. If everything else in your business is fine, if your metrics are going, everything's up and to the right, then fundraising is easy and investors will beat the path to your door. But that's not the case for about 99.9% of startups out there. So don't fuck it up because you only have one time to try. And there's no real way of training how to fundraise because the first time you need to go out and raise money is when you actually need to close that money. So one thing you really need to do when you start going out there is to prepare. And I found this really nice picture of a Superman to be. It says, get a cape, wear the cape, and then you fly. So without getting the cape, without the preparation for your fundraising, you will not get anywhere. One thing you want to do for yourself is you want to execute towards a milestone. This is general good advice for any startup, but especially in fundraising, you want to set yourself that milestone when you raise, and you define that milestone not just by, holy shit, we don't have any money anymore, but you define that milestone with how much time can you spend fundraising? When do you need the money to scale up? When do you need the money to do the next big thing in your company? Be that starting to hire, be that starting to spend serious amounts of money for marketing, whatever else that would be. That milestone is around what you should build your fundraising campaign. Because also, when you go out and talk to investors, there we go. When you go out and talk to investors, what they want to see is that you know why you're raising the money, what you're raising it for, and in the end, what you're going to do with it. Anyways, that milestone you want to set, that is something that is mostly operational and that will help you define when you start, how much money you're raising, and I don't know what's happening right now. So what is AngelList and why am I here talking about AngelList in the first place? We see ourselves as a platform for startups. And you might ask, what is a platform for startups? So think about it like you think about Facebook, like you think about Twitter, like you think about LinkedIn. There's a network of people and entities upon which we build certain ways to interact with that network. And those are the apps that we build. AngelList is where startups find investors. It's where startups find talent to work with. It's also where investors obviously find those startups to invest in. But now it's also the place where investors can find money to invest and to earn money on the startups they invest in. It's also where talent finds work. So if you're not a founder in the audience, but you're actually someone who's highly ambitious, who's a developer, designer, and you want to work for a great startup, check out angel.co/candidates and angel.co/jobs to find a great job at an amazing startup. How did this whole thing come about, and what's the history of AngelList? I'm not going to bore you too much with this, but basically, venture hacks is what was the forerunner of AngelList. Does any one of you know venture hacks? Okay. Any founders in here who don't know venture hacks should really know venture hacks. It's basically the number one resource for founders to find out about how to fundraise, what to look out for in documents, in term sheets, and investment contracts, everything about building a company that nobody else will tell you because they don't want to give you the hard truth. It was started by Nivi and Naval, our two co-founders, in about 2007, and it really became the number one place where everyone looked for, all this advice on things that were locked in that black box of fundraising that exists because VCs and angel investors invest in startups multiple times per year. As a founder, you only raise funding maybe 2 or 3 times in your life. So it's a lot harder to get to know about these things and get good at these things if you only do it once or twice. And that's why Venture Hacks was started. So then people asked, this is great, we now know how to fundraise, and thank you very much, Nivi and Naval, we now know what to look out for in term sheets and investment contracts. But where's the money? How can we get money to invest into our startup? And that's why AngelList was born. And you see in the background how it looked in its first iteration, pretty terrible. And we all agree that it did look pretty terrible back then. But basically, it was a list of the people in Silicon Valley that were giving money to startups and that were active as angels. And the idea was, hey, we're sending all these emails out. Here's a great startup. Why don't you want to invest? Hey, Mark. Hey, Dave. Look at this company. It fits into what you do. We think it's a good one. That just isn't scalable. And everyone at AngelList is involved in startups and wants to build a technology company. So we just applied that same thing to this problem. It's a huge market. It's extremely fragmented. It's broken. And as founders trying to get out there and raise funding, you all know how difficult it is and why that is a big problem. Today, we have about 30,000 investors on the site. There are more than 120,000 startups. So I think that's pretty much every startup in the world. Any of you who doesn't have a profile on AngelList should go and have a profile on AngelList. There's about 7,000 investors who are interested in investing in European startups on the site. So that's the kind of money and the kind of people that you can meet on AngelList. I talked about talent earlier. We launched this as a side project because one of our engineers said, look, we have all these profiles, we have all these people, we have all these companies. Why don't we offer the talent on the side a way to interact with the companies and find jobs? So he built it on his own, launched it, and we now placed more than 6,000 people in startups. More than 600 people in Europe found their job or their companies or their co-founders on AngelList. And that's more than 260,000 one-to-one matches of people talking to each other. It's really a big part of what we do at AngelList and something we're really excited about. US founders especially can find some very good talent that is without all going through recruiters, sifting through job profiles on LinkedIn and stuff like that. It's a lot easier, a lot faster. And it's free, by the way. And then last year we launched something called Syndicates. And as I said, we think angel investors and people who've built technology companies themselves are the best investors for startups. Syndicates empowers angels with more money to invest, and they can actually earn a carry on any returns they make on the companies they invest in. They can find co-investors that together invest in the startup, let the lead investor manage all the company, all the stuff with the founder, manage the board seat maybe, and they can invest smaller sums of money in more and more startups and get diversification that way. The idea is that the lead investor can earn carry and can focus on investing in startups. The co-investors and backers, they can invest in more startups because they invest smaller sums in each individual startup. And the founder only needs to interact with the lead investor, which makes life a lot easier for him. Is this crowdfunding? It's not really crowdfunding because it's not something for everyone. We don't think everyone should invest in startups, but the people that do invest in AngelList syndicates are more than 60% founders themselves. So all those people that you might end up with in your syndicate don't end up being dentists and people who just made some money somewhere in other industries, but they're actually people from the startup and technology scene. Yeah, we had this before. So how do you use AngelList, and how do you use AngelList to the best of your abilities, and how do you get the most of it? As I said, fundraising is hard. You shouldn't fuck it up because there's only one time to try. What you want to do, and this is, I've seen this at 100 companies at Seed Camp. Everybody does the same mistake. They go out, maybe 2 to 3 months before their cash runs out and say, holy shit, we need to raise a round of funding. Let me call up all these investors. Hey, can you open your Rolodex? Make some intros to Fred Wilson, Dave McClure, Jason, who was on stage here earlier. I want to talk to these guys. I need to get some money in. It's a really good opportunity, but you need to act fast. And, don't blame them, but investors don't really work that way. They want to get to know you as a founding team. They want to know more about your industry. They want to see how you do over 2 to 3 months. If you make promises, they want to see if you can keep your promises, if you can actually grow the way and build the way that you say you can. And that's why you always need to start building your appropriate network of investment contacts relatively early. That means when you're just starting an idea, don't pitch all the angels that you want to get on board 6 months from now. Build a personal relationship with them. Tell them about what you're doing. Don't pitch them to invest just yet. Show them over the course of those 2 to 3 months, or maybe even more, that you actually know what you're doing, that you're actually talking to the right people, you're hiring the right people, you're building a product that people love, you're doing something that gets attention in the marketplace, and not in the tech industry, but actually the industry in which you're building a company. Before you launch your fundraising campaign, build your AngelList profile. And it's really funny how people, not just on AngelList, but any other online fundraising platform, how little time people spend putting that profile together. When you think about how much time you put together for a deck that you might present at a VC firm, and you're only going to present that maybe 5 times, because that's how often you get into a partner meeting, and then think about how many people will see your online profile. On AngelList, you can actually see how many people view your profile on a daily basis, and you can see the stats. If you build an interesting profile, obviously more people are going to look at it. More people are going to ask for introductions. But definitely hundreds, maybe thousands more people will see this profile than will see your investment deck that you spend days and weeks perfecting. So it is your company's identity. Obviously, people can follow and stay in touch even when you're not fundraising. The best thing about it, you control the message about your company. So if you put your profile out there, people can actually find out about you what you want to tell them. And it's not some competitor talking about you. It's not some journalist talking about you. It's you telling these investors and people what you are all about, what is important about your company, why you're special. I would say about 20% of the emails I get are, hey, Philip, can you look at my AngelList profile? Do you think this is OK? I can tell you one thing that's really simple. Build a complete profile where people understand what you do, fill out all the fields that are there on AngelList. We put them there for a reason. And your profile would probably look pretty good. You can obviously perfect it, use the right language, and make it look nicer than just filling it out. But the rule of thumb is if you have a full profile, that's probably a good profile. When you fundraise, most important thing, you want to be interesting to investors. You don't want to be the company that's better than your competitors just because your metrics look a little bit nicer. No. You want to be interesting all the way through. So the number one thing, as I mentioned earlier, that will get you investors beating the path to your door is you have massive traction. You launch this iOS app, and a month later you have 1 million users. You don't need to worry about finding an angel investor. They will find you. So that's 1,000 points, and you're probably done with your fundraising round pretty quickly. You might have a great product, and people on Product Hunt might be talking about it. People on AngelList, are liking your profile, sharing your profile because they say, hey, look at this. This is something really cool. And you don't have maybe 1 million users, you don't have 100,000 users, but you have a steady growth in numbers, and you can show, hey, people like this product. And the investor themselves might like the product. If you read VC blogs, and most of you probably do, you can tell how many VCs over the past 2 years have resorted to writing about how awesome the products are of the companies they're investing, how important design is nowadays for companies. So this is something that obviously speaks to what you do, how you understand your market, how you understand your customer. So great product will give you, fiction 100 points. If you're building hard technology, it's something that's really difficult to understand. You're feeding insects to people, or you do something in crazy artificial intelligence. You're building flying cars, or you're building flying car engines. Nobody understands what you do. It's probably really, really hard, and only 10 people in the world can do what you do. But it's just a very difficult thing to explain to investors. So you get fewer points for really hard tech, but you might find the investor that's looking exactly at what you do, and you convince him. You can also be a nice person. That is, you go to conferences, you meet people, you can build your network, and that's your personal network. That's your personal brand that you're building, and maybe someone will invest because of that, because they think, hey, this is a great guy, I should give him some money, I'm pretty sure he will come up with something good. If you're building a clone business, if you're taking an idea that someone else already did, people are usually not that interested. Again, once you actually have those metrics, once you're actually 10 steps ahead of your competition, then people will like that. But in the beginning, it's just not that sexy if you're building a clone business, and that's the same thing online or offline. If you come and you pitch an idea, that's obviously nothing nowadays. If you are a team of 2 or 3 and you don't have a designer and an engineer on the team that can build the first prototype of your product, then any investor nowadays will probably think you're useless, and you don't get much for that. So then the next step is, how do you execute the fundraise? How do you actually do the things I'm talking about? And I think a lot of people shy away from fundraising because it is something they're not good at, because it is something they're not really that interested in. It is something they don't really know how it works. It's really hard. You get a lot of rejection. So people don't like to embrace the fundraise. I think it's a good thing if founders do it, because it means they go all in. All they do for a while is fundraise. All they do is think about which investor to talk to, which investor to research, and how to reach out to them. So I think that's something you should really do. You should also focus on this, and that means get one guy on your team to talk to investors. Let the rest of the team build product, talk to your customers, do whatever it takes to actually run the company, but have one person run the fundraising process. There's nothing more confusing than having a partner meeting where on the one day founder A comes in, and next week the other guy comes in and says, yeah, he briefed me on your interactions. No, one person needs to own this process. Same thing as in a sales process. You can't just hand these conversations off to someone else. One person should focus on this, let the other people work on the business and build the business. In a pitch, obviously you need to rehearse, and this is the pitch that you give in person. This is the pitch that you give via email. This is the pitch that you give on Twitter and social media. Remove things that are unclear. Remove things where you see that people are not really excited about it or asking about it. Make it simpler. Make it, as short as possible, as sweet as possible. And obviously, refine. Go back. When someone asks a question about a slide that isn't very clear, go back, change it. If you always get the same question in the intros that you get on AngelList, just put it in your profile, change. And don't assume that what you did in the first place was correct. And then run a process. There's nothing more frustrating than working with an entrepreneur who says, okay, guns out, I'm going fundraising, I'm embracing this, I'm the only guy doing this. And then, he sends out 100 emails to 100 different people, and, 2 weeks later you ask him where we're going. Yeah, I'm meeting that guy next week, and then I think this other guy wanted to get in touch. Oh, I should reply to that email. That's not how you run a successful fundraising process. You build a spreadsheet, it's like a sales pipeline, 100 people go in on top, and if you're lucky, 1 or 2 people come out at the bottom. Run a process, document it, keep people in the loop, make sure you don't forget about anybody, tell your team what you're doing, tell existing investors what you're doing and how you're doing. Just run a process. And use the same effort online as you do offline. Tools like AngelList and other crowdfunding or online fundraising platforms allow you to reach many, many more people than you can reach in person. So put the same amount of effort, put the same amount of thought into how you reach out to those investors and how you talk to them, how you convince them, and again, how you run that process. And then once you started talking to people, once you started reaching out to people, once you have some interest, it's time to start closing. And this is obviously the most difficult part, because this is also when shit hits the fan and you actually need to get a yes or a no from someone. How do you do this? You do this by, first of all, building demand. And the most difficult thing is to find a lead that can set a valuation on the company and that you can go out with, say, Dave is investing in my company. He's a credible investor from San Francisco. Will you join this round at the terms he set? The most difficult thing is finding that lead, that first person that says, yes, I will join. All the other people will fall over like dominoes once you have that one lead. It's really important to understand that lead doesn't necessarily mean this is the guy that puts the most money into this round. It's simply the guy that's running the process with you and that's willing to help find additional investors to come on board. If you can close the investment in parallel, that means running different conversations and signing different documents at the same time is a very good thing, and that happens to be standard in the US right now. It's still a little earlier in that regard in Europe. Not a lot of people like convertible notes. But if there's a way for you to sign people and to sign term sheets or even investment docs with an investor one by one, that's a lot easier than lining everybody up and then doing a big close at the end. Because people, might cool off. They realize they don't really like your company that much. If you can close them when they say yes, that's the best thing you can do. And again, stay on top of this process. Make sure you don't forget about people. Make sure that people who said yes actually get a follow-up, that you actually close them, that you actually get the money in, that you actually get the signatures. And not 2 months later, you're like, OK, now we have everybody together. Here are the docs. And people say, like, well, I didn't hear from you in two months. That money is now going somewhere else. And then leverage that lead, that one person that says yes for more. And AngelList is actually the absolute perfect place to do this. Companies that raise funding on AngelList that have a lead investor committed have it so much easier than someone who just wants to go out there and just meet a bunch of angels. The thing is, you can actually say, I have someone who's setting the valuation, who's putting in 200 of 600K, and you just need to come in, agree on those terms, and someone actually can think about it. So what you don't want to do is waste your bullets too early. So you don't want to talk to people that are very unlikely to close unless you have a lead before you start going out. You can find out who these people are by talking to your friends who've raised before. Maybe you're in an accelerator program, and you can talk to the people that run it. Maybe you have an early angel investor. But don't talk to people too early that won't close without a lead. Stay real to the people that say yes in the beginning. So if someone believes in you, gives you a term sheet for maybe a third of the round, and at a okay valuation, don't kick them out when 2 months later, when everything is done, a big VC comes along and gives you a higher valuation, a higher number. These people believed in you first. So my opinion is you should stay real to them and give them their chunk of the round because they believed in you first. And that is something where, those are the people that probably will support you the most throughout the life of your company. Again, run your process. And yeah, this is how you raise funds like a superhero. You prepare, you execute, and you close. What you shouldn't do, and this is mostly about AngelList, don't change the story. Don't go crazy doing something. Suddenly your profile is something completely else than 2 weeks ago because someone who follows your company will be confused. That doesn't mean don't pivot. Obviously, if your whole company is in a pivot situation, then that's a different story. But don't change what you're telling people throughout the process. Don't have a sloppy profile. I talked about this earlier. Just make sure you sit down, walk through it, you have someone else look at it, have your friends, have your early investors look through your profile and see if everybody understands what you actually do. Don't expect anyone to come to you, or don't expect everyone to come to you, rather. So, it's the same thing with customers. You build it and they will come. They will not. You need to tell people that you're out there fundraising. You need to reach out to people. You need to build that network. It's not necessarily 100% easier when you do things online. It's only when you do things online you can reach people that you otherwise couldn't. You still need to put in all the hard work. And if you can, please don't be too secretive. Because there's nothing more turning off for an investor than a startup saying, yeah, no, we can give you the data if you sign this NDA. Nobody's going to do that. Even more so on an online platform, if you don't share the information, nobody will be interested because they can't figure out from looking at your profile whether your company is actually doing anything interesting. So there are 3 things about confidentiality that, obviously we get asked a lot. Number 1 is, I think, nobody really cares about your startup. Nobody cares what you do. Your mom does, your friends do, but nobody out there who's investing in companies really cares what you do unless it's interesting. So unless you show them why it's interesting, they won't go and dig for more information. If you tell them, hey, I'd like to pitch you, but they can't see anything, they won't reply with an email, say, I want to see this, that, and that. If they can't see it on your profile, but they can see it on another 10,000 companies, they're not going to ask you because they don't know why you should be any special. Number 2, your competition probably already knows what you're doing, and especially how you're doing. So when you, as an investor, talk to companies and you ask them about competition, they often know surprising amounts of information by following all sorts of channels and finding information in all sorts of places. So if you're concerned that your competitor might find out something about your company, they probably already know it. And the likelihood that they get it from AngelList first is very low. And then the third fact is, I think, if you put information out there, especially around metrics, the only thing that is going to get hurt is your ego. And this is not something that will make me very popular with people, and that is not something that makes me very popular with people that I tell this in person. But when you have metrics and you show how you're growing, if you're growing, when you show how many people are downloading your app week by week, month by month, then people can actually get an idea of where you are. As soon as you convince an investor to invest, that person will see those numbers anyways. So think about it, the people that are investing will be fine with those numbers. So why not show it to everybody in the first place? Yeah, if you have more questions, as I said, I'm going to be behind the stage in a few minutes. If you are looking for talent, use talent on AngelList. It's angel.co/candidates. If you have a startup profile, it's very simple. You put a job profile up. We have hundreds of engineers. We have hundreds of designers. Almost every one of those people is startup caliber. And that's, I think, the really interesting thing. If you recruit in normal job platforms, most people have not worked in the technology industry before or haven't worked in startups before. And as soon as you hired a bunch of those people and had to fire them again, you know what I'm talking about, because it is a very different thing to write up a marketing plan, to run SEO for a small company when nothing's in place, there's no resource, and nobody knows what the fuck they're doing. So finding these people is really difficult. Thankfully, because AngelList is the place where those people go and hang out, this is where you can find them. So yes, get your cape and go start an online fundraising campaign.
Thank you, Philip.
I have a minute and a half, so if anybody has a...
we have a little bit more. Don't worry, you know. You have buddies backstage, I'm just kidding. We have a little bit more, don't worry about timer. And there are already questions. Some people posting already in the Pioneers app using Interact. That's how you can ask questions or upvote them. Or you can just raise your hand and we come with the mic. Okay, first we take from Slido, then the gentleman over there. How many investments and exits have you already completed? With you mean AngelList or?
Probably.
All right.
I'm going to talk about AngelList. Well, personally, I said at SeedCamp I was part of about 120 companies. At AngelList, there's two things. So on the one hand, there's offline fundraising where you just get introductions to investors on AngelList. And we don't know exactly what those numbers are because these investments are not closed on AngelList. Obviously, we do see when an investor that asks for an introduction on AngelList later gets tagged as an investor in that company. This is thousands of companies, literally thousands of companies. Over the past year, we've actively helped tens of, I would say about 50 to 70 companies I personally helped over the past few months raise money that way on AngelList. And then Syndicates in the US, we've done more than 200 deals going through the platform. Everything from pitching to closing to wiring the money through AngelList. And that's in the past 12 months. How do I get introductions to potential angel investors? So AngelList doesn't bring you these people magically to your door. What you need to do is you still need to talk to your network, talk to the people that you know to introduce you to people. AngelList is just a very simple way to do this. If you go to your profile, it says Find Investors on top. You click that button, and you can reach out to the investors that your network knows.
Philip, we have a question over here in the audience. Can you stand up, please?
Sorry to say, but you hardly mentioned anything like really new. I was wondering, and maybe it's just me, I wouldn't use AngelList to use like the kind of Reid Hoffman or Dave McClure. And maybe it's just me, but can AngelList really like help me to identify the angel not everyone knows? So identify the family offices, identify the mid-level managers that earn like 6-figure budgets, like to identify the real hidden angels and be like of real value to not talk to everyone like anyone's talking to already anyway. So like new people.
I get the point. Yes, you can. If you go to angel.co/people, it's a very simple search engine, and you can tag people by location, by expertise, companies they have worked for. And we have hundreds of thousands of people on the site. So these are people that are not Dave McClure, that are not Reid Hoffman, but that are people who put money into companies. Obviously, they need to know about AngelList, and we don't know every high net worth individual on the planet, but those are people who are already looking at startups on AngelList, so they're very open to receiving pitches and finding people on the site. So I urge you to use that to reach out to people and find people.
Well, Philip, the next question from Slido is AngelList also the best platform in Europe or only in the US?
Yeah, I think so. Although on a much lower level, obviously, than in the US. We've only started actively reaching out to companies and investors in Europe this year. So obviously, things are taking a little bit longer. I don't know what another platform would be in Europe that you can reach out to that number and depth of startup investors. So I would say so. Obviously, we still have a long way to go, and we know this. Andy, my colleague in London, and myself, we're very open. We like to help you guys when you're fundraising. Reach out to us, and we do the best we can to make this the absolute best place for you in Europe as well.
Here's an interesting question. What is AngelList's business model? How do you make money?
So the syndicates part that I talked about, where we actually transact the investment into the company, is where we make money. We take a cut of the carry, that is the money that gets paid back to the investors when there is an exit. So we're in it for the very long game. We don't take any percentage of the money that you raise and put that in our pocket. We only make money when the investors and the startup make money themselves.
All right. Would you be? What is your commission? Was the question? Would you disclose?
It's very open. We happily share those numbers. We take 5% carry on the amount of money that gets invested through AngelList in a syndicate. That is not the whole round. That is not the lead investor's money. Only the money that comes from AngelList.
Okay, maybe last question, because then it's really time for the next speaker. What is the optimal funding range that you can get on AngelList?
So if you raise in a normal offline fundraising situation, usually between 200,000 euros and $1 million is the sweet spot in Europe. We've also done a lot larger rounds, especially in the US, but I think between 200 and $1 million is the amount that really fits. Especially if you have a lead investor and a certain part of the round is already taken, then that is definitely a good number.
All right, Philip, unfortunately out of time, but as you said before, just a second, you're going to be backside of the stage in the Winter Garden, where you can drink coffee, have food there, and be available for questions for the next hour or so.
Yeah, I'm going to be out there as long as people come and ask questions. You can always tweet at me, you can email me, philip@angel.co. There's many ways of getting in touch. I usually reply to everything. So
thank you very much. Make some noise to Philip. Thank you.